They never imagined that forcing Emma Thompson to crawl on her hands and knees, pressing her face into the muddy gravel while they filmed her humiliation, would be the last mistake they'd ever make at Oakwood High School. For months, Rachel Morgan and her crew of privileged tormentors had perfected their cruel rituals, breaking spirit after spirit until their victims fled in shame. But today, behind the gymnasium where no teachers could interfere, they were about to discover that the quiet girl they'd chosen to destroy had been hiding 7 years of deadly combat training, waiting for exactly this moment to unleash everything. She'd learned about turning predators into prey. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning frost still clung to the windows of Emma Thompson's bedroom when her alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., the same time it had every day since she'd started at Oakwood High School 3 months ago. The tiny apartment she shared with her mother on Maple Street felt smaller each morning, the walls seeming to press closer as another day of navigating the social minefield awaited her. Emma rolled out of her narrow bed, careful not to wake her mother, who had finally fallen asleep just 2 hours earlier after finishing her night shift at the 24-hour diner downtown. The reflection staring back at Emma from the cracked bathroom mirror showed a 17-year-old girl who had learned to make herself invisible. Her brown hair hung straight and unremarkable past her shoulders, deliberately styled to avoid drawing attention. Her clothes, carefully selected from the clearance racks at discount stores, were clean but clearly inexpensive. Everything about her appearance was calculated to help her blend into the background, to avoid the kind of notice that had made her life miserable at every school she'd attended. What that reflection couldn't show was the fierce intelligence burning behind Emma's dark eyes, or the countless hours of sacrifice that had brought her to this prestigious public school in Westfield County's wealthiest district. Her mother, Carol Thompson, had worked triple shifts and taken on crushing debt to move them into this school district, betting everything on Emma's academic potential. The pressure of that sacrifice weighed on Emma's shoulders like a physical burden, driving her to maintain perfect grades while navigating a social environment where she would never truly belong. Emma's morning routine was precisely timed and methodically executed. 20 minutes for a quick shower using the discount shampoo that left her hair clean but lifeless. 15 minutes to dress in her carefully planned outfit of dark jeans and a plain sweater that wouldn't show stains if someone accidentally spilled something on her. 10 minutes to prepare a simple breakfast and pack a lunch from whatever ingredients they had in their sparse refrigerator. 5 minutes to review her homework one final time, ensuring every assignment was flawless. The walk to Oakwood High School took exactly 28 minutes from her apartment complex, a route Emma had optimized to avoid the neighborhoods where her wealthiest classmates lived. She preferred the anonymity of the busy main roads over the risk of encountering groups of students who might recognize her as the scholarship kid from the wrong side of town. The morning air was crisp with approaching winter, and Emma pulled her thin jacket tighter as she walked, knowing it would have to last her through another cold season, regardless of whether it provided adequate warmth. Oakwood High School rose before her like a monument to everything she aspired to achieve and everything that seemed perpetually out of reach. The building itself was impressive, with modern architecture and sprawling grounds that spoke of a community that valued education and had the resources to support it properly. The parking lot was filled with cars that cost more than Emma's mother earned in several years, driven by students who viewed expensive vehicles as basic necessities rather than impossible luxuries. Emma had learned to time her arrival precisely, to avoid the morning social rituals that dominated the front entrance. Too early, and she'd encounter the athletes arriving for morning workouts, their easy confidence and casual entitlement making her feel like an intruder. Too late, and she'd have to navigate through the clusters of friends, reconnecting after their evening apart, their conversations filled with references to experiences and possessions that highlighted the vast economic gulf between their worlds. The hallways of Oakwood High School were a carefully choreographed social ecosystem where every student knew their place and role. Emma had spent her first week studying these dynamics with the intensity of an anthropologist, mapping the invisible, boundaries and unspoken rules that governed daily interactions. She understood that her survival depended on remaining beneath the notice of those who held real power in this environment. Her first class was Advanced Placement Chemistry, where Emma consistently earned the highest scores despite using a calculator. She'd bought at a dollar store and taking notes in a composition notebook, rather than the expensive lab journals most students preferred. Dr. Martinez, the chemistry teacher, had quickly recognized Emma's exceptional aptitude and had begun providing additional challenges that pushed her understanding beyond the standard curriculum. These extra assignments were Emma's favorite part of each school day, moments when her intelligence could shine without social complications. During chemistry class, Emma noticed the way other students reacted when Dr. Martinez announced test scores or praised her understanding of complex concepts. Some showed genuine respect for her academic abilities, but others displayed the subtle resentment that successful scholarship students often encountered. She had learned to accept compliments quietly and avoid any behavior that might be interpreted as arrogance or superiority, knowing that her academic success was already creating tension with students who expected to dominate in all areas. Between classes, Emma navigated the hallways with practiced invisibility, keeping her eyes down and moving purposefully toward her destinations. She had memorized the locations of quiet bathrooms and secluded study areas where she could retreat. When the social pressure became overwhelming, the library had become her sanctuary, a place where her love of learning was welcomed and her economic background was irrelevant to her ability to access information and resources. Lunch period presented the daily challenge of finding somewhere to eat without highlighting her isolation or inviting unwanted attention. Emma had discovered that eating quickly in the library allowed her to avoid the complex social negotiations of the cafeteria while providing additional time for studying. Her homemade sandwiches and simple snacks were adequate nutrition, even if they couldn't compare to the elaborate meals many students purchased or brought from home. During lunch on this particular day, Emma was reviewing her notes for afternoon calculus when she first noticed Rachel Morgan watching her from across the library. Rachel was everything Emma was not: blonde, beautiful, expensively dressed, and surrounded by an aura of unquestioned social authority. Her presence in the library was unusual, since she typically spent lunch holding court in the cafeteria's prime real estate near the windows. Rachel's 3 constant companions flanked her like palace guards. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Megan Clark sat to her right, her dark hair styled in an elaborate arrangement that probably took longer to create than Emma spent on her entire morning routine. Sophia Davis occupied the chair to Rachel's left, scrolling through her phone with the bored expression of someone accustomed to constant entertainment and stimulation. Lauren White stood behind them, her athletic frame and predatory smile suggesting someone who enjoyed the physical aspects of their group's dominance. Emma pretended not to notice their attention while every instinct screamed warnings about the danger they represented. Years of surviving difficult social environments had taught her to recognize predators, and everything about Rachel's group screamed carefully controlled threat. Their expensive clothes, perfectly applied makeup, and casual confidence marked Them as members of Oakwood High School's untouchable elite, students whose family connections provided protection from consequences that would destroy lesser students. The bell, signaling the end of lunch period, provided Emma with an excuse to pack her belongings and leave the library. But she could feel their eyes following her movement. As she walked past their table, Rachel's voice carried clearly enough for her to hear. Some people really don't understand their place, do they? The comment was delivered with the casual cruelty of someone accustomed to making observations about other people's perceived shortcomings. Emma kept walking without reaction, but her heart rate increased as she recognized the tone that preceded systematic harassment campaigns. She had heard similar comments at previous schools, always delivered by students who viewed themselves as gatekeepers of social acceptability. Emma's afternoon classes passed in a blur of academic content and social anxiety. During advanced placement history, she participated in a discussion about economic inequality with an irony that would have been amusing if it weren't so personally relevant. Her insights into poverty and social mobility came from lived experience rather than textbook theory, but she was careful to frame her contributions in academic language that wouldn't reveal too much about her background. In calculus, Emma solved complex problems with an ease that drew admiring glances from classmates who struggled with concepts she found intuitive. Mathematics had always been her strongest subject, the logical progression of formulas and proofs, providing a clarity that social interactions lacked. Numbers didn't care about her economic background or social status. They simply required correct application of established principles. The final bell of the school day brought relief mixed with apprehension. Emma's afternoon routine involved a careful balance of maximizing study time while avoiding situations where she might encounter hostile classmates without adult supervision. The school building emptied quickly as students rushed toward their after-school activities, part-time jobs, or social gatherings that Emma was neither invited to nor interested in attending. Emma's actual afternoon destination was a secret she guarded more carefully than her family's financial struggles. 3 blocks from Oakwood High School, in a converted warehouse that most students would never notice, Master Kim's self-defense studio occupied a space that looked unremarkable from the outside, but contained everything Emma needed to maintain the skills that might someday save her life. Master Kim had been expecting Emma when she first appeared at his studio 3 years earlier, a frightened 14-year-old whose mother had finally saved enough money for self-defense lessons after. Their apartment had been broken into while they slept. What Master Kim hadn't expected was Emma's natural aptitude for combat, her ability to absorb complex techniques with frightening speed, and her dedication to training that went far beyond what most students demonstrated. The studio's interior was sparse and functional, with mirrors covering one wall and various training equipment arranged around the open floor space. The smell of sweat and determination filled the air, along with the underlying scent of the herbal ointments Master Kim used to treat training injuries. This was Emma's real world, the place where her true identity emerged from beneath the carefully constructed facade she maintained at school. Master Kim greeted Emma with the slight bow that always reminded her of the discipline and respect that governed their training relationship. He was a compact man in his 50s whose unassuming appearance concealed decades of martial arts mastery and combat experience. His teaching methods were demanding and unforgiving, designed to prepare students for real-world violence rather than tournament competition. "You seem distracted today," Master Kim observed as Emma changed into her training clothes. His ability to read her emotional state was uncanny, developed through years of watching students prepare for combat, both physical and psychological. Emma considered sharing her concerns about Rachel Morgan and her crew, but decided against it. Master Kim had always emphasized that martial arts were for self-defense and protection of others, never for settling social disputes or gaining advantage in non-violent conflicts. She would handle the situation at school using conventional methods, until or unless it escalated beyond psychological harassment. "Just school stress," Emma replied, stretching her muscles and beginning the warm-up routine that preceded every training session. The familiar movements helped center her mind and prepare her body for the intense workout ahead. Their training session began with forms practice, the choreographed sequences of movements that taught proper technique while building muscle memory for combat situations. Emma moved through the familiar patterns with fluid precision, each kick and punch executed with the power and accuracy that came from thousands of repetitions. Master Kim watched critically, occasionally correcting minor flaws in her positioning or timing. "Your technique is excellent," Master Kim commented as they transitioned to sparring practice, "but your mind is elsewhere. In real combat, distraction equals death." The sparring session was intense and demanding, requiring Emma to focus completely on the immediate challenges of attack and defense. Master Kim was a formidable opponent despite the decades between them, his experience and tactical knowledge compensating for any physical advantages Emma might possess. Their exchanges were conducted at nearly full speed and power, preparing Emma for the reality of violence rather than the sanitized version taught in most martial arts schools. As they concluded the session with meditation and stretching, Master Kim's expression grew serious. "Remember that true strength comes from avoiding conflict when possible, but also from being prepared when avoidance fails. The warrior's greatest victory is the fight that never happens, but the warrior must always be ready for the fight that cannot be avoided." Emma nodded, understanding that Master Kim's wisdom extended far beyond physical combat techniques. His lessons about mental discipline, emotional control, and strategic thinking had applications in every aspect of her life, including the social warfare she was beginning to face at Oakwood High School. The walk home from the studio was Emma's transition time, allowing her to shift from warrior back to invisible student. By the time she reached her apartment, she had buried her combat skills beneath layers of academic focus and social anxiety, becoming once again the quiet scholarship girl who posed no apparent threat to anyone. Emma's evening routine was as carefully structured as her morning preparation. 2 hours of homework and study, ensuring that her academic performance remained flawless regardless of any social pressures she might face. 30 minutes of hidden martial arts practice in her bedroom, maintaining her physical conditioning and muscle memory. 1 hour of household responsibilities, helping her mother with laundry, cleaning, and meal preparation. Her mother arrived, home from her evening shift at the grocery store, as Emma was finishing her calculus homework. Carol Thompson looked exhausted, her face showing the accumulated strain of working multiple jobs while worrying constantly about her daughter's welfare and future prospects. Despite her fatigue, she always asked about Emma's day with genuine interest and concern. "How was school today, sweetheart?" Carol asked, settling into their second-hand couch with a cup of tea and a sigh of relief. "Fine, Mom. Made a perfect score on my chemistry test, and Dr. Martinez thinks I should consider applying for additional science scholarships." Emma's response was technically truthful, while omitting any mention of the social complications that were beginning to develop. Carol's face brightened with pride and hope. "That's wonderful, Emma. All this sacrifice will be worth it when you're attending Stanford or MIT on a full scholarship. You're going to have opportunities I never dreamed of." Emma smiled and nodded, knowing that her mother's dreams were the driving force behind everything she endured at Oakwood High School. The pressure to succeed academically was enormous, but it was also motivation to persevere through whatever social challenges arose. Her education was the key to escaping poverty and building a better life for both of them. As Emma prepared for bed, She reflected on the day's events and the growing sense that her carefully maintained invisibility was beginning to fail. Rachel Morgan's attention represented a significant threat to her academic focus and long-term goals. Emma understood that she was entering a period where her survival skills would be tested in ways that went beyond physical combat. Looking at herself in the bathroom mirror before brushing her teeth, Emma saw the same unremarkable girl who had started the day 12 hours earlier. But beneath that carefully constructed exterior, she could feel the warrior that Master Kim had been training for the past 7 years. If Rachel and her crew pushed beyond psychological harassment into physical confrontation, they would discover that their quiet target possessed skills that could neutralize threats with swift and devastating effectiveness. Emma's final thought, before falling asleep, was a promise to herself and to her mother's sacrifices. No group of privileged bullies would drive her away from Oakwood High School or interfere with her path to academic success. She had survived poverty, violence, and discrimination before, and she would survive whatever challenges Rachel Morgan could devise. The warrior sleeps lightly, and when awakened, responds with precision and overwhelming force. The next morning brought an unexpected shift in the atmosphere at Oakwood High School. Emma noticed it immediately as she walked through the front entrance, the way conversations seemed to pause when she passed, the subtle glances that followed her movement down the hallways. Word had somehow spread about her perfect chemistry score, and with it came the kind of attention she had spent months trying to avoid. Rachel Morgan stood near the main bulletin board with her usual entourage, but today their formation seemed more deliberate, more predatory. They were positioned to observe the flow of students entering the building, and Emma could feel their collective gaze tracking her as she made her way toward her locker. The sensation reminded her of being stalked by a pack of hunters who had finally identified their prey and were beginning to circle for the kill. Emma's locker was located in a section of the building that typically remained quiet during the morning rush, another element of her carefully planned invisibility strategy. But today, as she approached her combination lock, she discovered that someone had been there before her. A folded piece of paper had been wedged into the vent slots, positioned so that it would be impossible to miss when she opened the metal door. The note was written on expensive stationery that reeked of designer perfume, the kind of unnecessary luxury that marked its author as someone accustomed to using material possessions as weapons of intimidation. The handwriting was perfect, clearly practiced in private schools, where penmanship was still considered a mark of proper breeding and social superiority. "Emma Thompson," the note began, "it has come to our attention that you may be confused about the academic standards expected at Oakwood High School. Some students have been questioning whether your recent test scores reflect your actual abilities, or whether you might be receiving inappropriate assistance. We thought you should know that people are talking, and not everyone believes that scholarship students are capable of genuine academic excellence." The message was unsigned, but its authors were obvious. The careful phrasing was designed to plant seeds of doubt while avoiding any direct accusations that could be traced back to specific individuals. It was psychological warfare disguised as helpful advice, intended to make Emma question herself and her achievements while creating paranoia about her reputation among faculty and students. Emma read the note twice before folding it carefully and placing it in her backpack alongside her documentation of previous harassment incidents. The escalation was predictable but still concerning, representing a shift from passive observation to active psychological manipulation. She understood that this was likely the beginning of a systematic campaign designed to undermine her confidence and academic performance. Her first period advanced placement literature class provided a temporary refuge from the growing tension. Mrs. Rodriguez had assigned a unit on social class and economic inequality in American literature, and Emma found herself genuinely engaged with texts that explored themes directly relevant to her own experiences. The discussion of characters who struggled to transcend their economic circumstances resonated deeply, though she was careful not to reveal too much personal investment in the subject matter. During the class discussion of The Great Gatsby, Emma offered insights about the corrupting influence of inherited wealth and the barriers facing those who attempted to climb social ladders through merit alone. Her observations were sophisticated and well articulated, drawing appreciative nods from Mrs. Rodriguez and thoughtful responses from several classmates who hadn't previously paid much attention to the quiet scholarship student. But Emma also noticed the eye rolls and whispered comments from students who clearly resented her participation in discussions they viewed as their intellectual territory. The same academic performance that earned respect from teachers was simultaneously creating resentment among peers who expected to dominate classroom discourse without challenge from scholarship students. As the class period ended, Emma overheard a conversation between two students that made her stomach clench with anxiety. "She acts like she's so smart, but everyone knows scholarship kids get extra help and easier tests. My dad says the school has quotas to fill, so they have to pass certain students regardless of whether they actually deserve it." The comment was delivered loudly enough to ensure Emma would hear it, a calculated attempt to humiliate her while providing plausible deniability if she chose to report the incident. Emma kept walking without reaction, but she filed the information away as further evidence of the campaign being waged against her academic reputation. During second period calculus, Emma faced her most significant challenge yet. Mr. Patterson announced that the upcoming exam would count for 25% of their semester grade and would cover the most complex material they had studied so far. He also mentioned that he would be watching carefully for any signs of academic dishonesty, given recent concerns about the integrity of test scores in advanced classes. The pointed look Mr. Patterson directed toward Emma's desk made it clear that someone had planted suggestions about her academic honesty. The implication that she might be cheating was devastating, not only because it was false, but because it threatened the foundation of everything she had worked to achieve. Her perfect academic record was her only pathway to college scholarships and escape from poverty. Emma spent the remainder of the class period fighting back tears of frustration and rage, while struggling to concentrate on mathematical proofs that normally came easily to her. The psychological pressure was exactly what her tormentors intended, designed to disrupt her academic performance and provide evidence that she was indeed not capable of sustained excellence. During lunch period, Emma chose to eat in an empty classroom rather than risk another encounter in the library. She needed time to process the escalating harassment while maintaining her emotional equilibrium for afternoon classes. The sandwich her mother had packed seemed tasteless as she contemplated the systematic destruction of her reputation that was apparently underway. Her solitude was interrupted when the classroom door opened to admit a student Emma recognized but had never spoken with directly. Kelly Martinez was a junior who served as editor of the school newspaper and president of the Academic Honor Society. She was known for her integrity and had built respect across social boundaries through her commitment to fair reporting and academic excellence. "Mind if I sit down?" Kelly asked, gesturing toward the desk next to Emma's improvised lunch table. "I wanted to talk with you about something that's been bothering me." Emma nodded cautiously, uncertain whether this unexpected visitor represented another threat or possibly an ally in an increasingly hostile environment. Kelly's expression was serious but not unfriendly, suggesting genuine concern rather than malicious intent. "I've been hearing rumors about your academic performance," Kelly began carefully, "and I wanted you to know that some of us don't believe the garbage that's being spread around." I've been in several classes with you, and anyone with eyes can see that your intelligence is genuine." The validation was more meaningful than Emma had expected, providing the first indication that not all students had bought into the narrative being promoted by Rachel's group. Kelly's reputation for honesty and academic integrity made her support particularly valuable in countering the whisper campaign about Emma's capabilities. "There's something else you should know," Kelly continued, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Rachel Morgan and her friends have been talking to teachers and administrators, suggesting that scholarship students are receiving unfair advantages. They're trying to get policies changed that would require additional oversight of financial aid recipients." Emma's heart sank as she realized the scope of the campaign against her. This wasn't just about social harassment or academic competition. It was an attempt to systematically undermine the opportunities available to students from low-income families. Rachel and her group were using Emma as a test case for broader discrimination against scholarship recipients. "Why are you telling me this?" Emma asked, genuinely curious about Kelly's motivations for sharing information that could potentially put her at odds with the school's most powerful social group. Kelly's expression hardened with determination. "Because I believe in fairness, and what they're doing isn't fair. My family isn't wealthy either, and I know how hard you have to work to maintain perfect grades while dealing with everything else. You deserve better than having your achievements questioned by people who've never had to struggle for anything." The conversation with Kelly provided Emma with valuable intelligence about her enemy's strategy, while also offering hope that she wasn't completely isolated in her fight. However, it also confirmed that the situation was escalating beyond simple social harassment into an attack on the fundamental principles of merit-based academic achievement. Emma's afternoon classes passed in a haze of anxiety and anger as she struggled to maintain focus while processing the implications of what Kelly had revealed. During chemistry lab, she noticed Dr. Martinez watching her more closely than usual, as if evaluating her performance for signs of the academic dishonesty that had apparently been suggested to him by concerned parents or students. The lab experiment required precise measurements and careful observation of chemical reactions, skills that Emma had mastered through months of dedicated study and practice. But today, under the weight of suspicious scrutiny, she found herself second-guessing every calculation and procedure. The psychological pressure was achieving exactly what her tormentors intended, undermining her confidence and disrupting her academic performance. After school, Emma walked to Master Kim's studio with her mind churning through possible responses to the escalating harassment campaign. She understood that conventional approaches like reporting to administrators were likely to be ineffective, given the influence wielded by her tormentors' families. The challenge was finding a way to defend herself without compromising her academic goals or violating the principles Master Kim had taught her about appropriate use of martial arts skills. Master Kim was waiting for her with an expression that suggested he had sensed her emotional turmoil before she walked through the door. His ability to read his students' mental states was one of the skills that made him such an effective teacher, allowing him to address psychological challenges alongside physical training. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing toward the meditation area where they typically began and ended training sessions. "Your mind is clouded with anger and fear. These emotions will compromise your judgment and make you vulnerable to manipulation by your enemies." Emma settled into the lotus position she had practiced countless times, attempting to center her thoughts and achieve the mental clarity that Master Kim considered essential for both combat and daily life. The breathing exercises helped slow her racing pulse, but the underlying anxiety remained just beneath the surface. "Tell me about the source of your disturbance," Master Kim said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. A warrior who cannot identify the nature of the threat cannot develop an effective defense strategy. Emma described the escalating harassment campaign in detail, from the note in her locker to the whispered accusations about academic dishonesty, to the broader attack on scholarship students' legitimacy. Master Kim listened without interruption, occasionally nodding to indicate his understanding of the tactical situation she was facing. "Your enemies are skilled in psychological warfare," he observed when Emma finished her account. "They understand that direct confrontation would expose them to consequences, so they have chosen to attack your reputation and emotional stability instead. This is actually a sign of their weakness rather than their strength." Master Kim's analysis helped Emma see the situation from a strategic perspective rather than simply reacting emotionally to each incident of harassment. The systematic nature of the campaign suggested careful planning, but also revealed patterns that could be anticipated and countered. "What would you advise?" Emma asked, genuinely seeking guidance about how to handle a threat that couldn't be resolved through physical combat. Master Kim was quiet for several minutes, considering the complexities of the situation and the various options available to his student. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of decades of experience in both martial arts and life strategy. "Document everything. Gather evidence of their campaign against you and other scholarship students. Build alliances with those who support fairness and academic integrity. And prepare yourself for the possibility that they will eventually escalate beyond psychological warfare into direct confrontation." The advice was practical and strategic, acknowledging both the immediate need for defensive measures and the longer-term possibility that Emma's martial arts skills might become necessary for her protection. Master Kim's approach emphasized using the minimum force necessary to achieve security, while maintaining the moral high ground throughout any conflict. Their training session that afternoon focused on defensive techniques against multiple attackers, scenarios that Master Kim suggested might become relevant if the harassment campaign continued to escalate. Emma practiced moves designed to neutralize threats quickly, while minimizing the risk of serious injury to her opponents, maintaining the ethical standards that governed legitimate self-defense. As the session concluded, Master Kim offered one final piece of guidance that would prove prophetic in the days ahead. "Remember that your enemies expect you to be weak and helpless. This expectation is their greatest vulnerability because it blinds them to your true capabilities. When the time comes to defend yourself, their surprise will be your advantage." Emma left the studio that evening with a clearer understanding of the challenges she faced and a strategic plan for responding to them. The harassment campaign was designed to break her spirit and drive her away from Oakwood High School, but it had instead strengthened her resolve to succeed despite the obstacles being placed in her path. The evening routine at home provided additional clarity about what was at stake in her conflict with Rachel's group. Her mother's exhaustion after another day of multiple jobs served as a constant reminder of the sacrifices being made to provide Emma with educational opportunities. The thought of allowing privileged bullies to destroy those opportunities was unacceptable. Emma spent 2 hours that night creating a detailed log of every harassment incident she had experienced, complete with dates, times, witnesses, and physical evidence. The documentation process helped her understand the systematic nature of the campaign while providing potential evidence if the situation escalated to the point where adult intervention became necessary. As she prepared for bed, Emma reflected on the day's revelations and the challenges that lay ahead. The harassment campaign was entering a more aggressive phase, but she now understood her enemy's strategy and had begun developing countermeasures. Her martial arts training had taught her that the greatest victories often came from patient preparation and strategic thinking, rather than reactive violence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and escalating pressure, but Emma felt more prepared to handle them than she had that morning. The warrior within her was awakening, and with it came the confidence that she could survive whatever Rachel Morgan and her privileged allies could devise. The quiet scholarship student they thought they could break was about to show them the difference between genuine strength and inherited privilege. The third week of October brought unseasonably cold weather to Westfield County, and with it came an intensification of the psychological warfare being waged against Emma Thompson. The first sign appeared when Emma arrived at her locker Tuesday morning to find that someone had tampered with her combination lock during the night. The mechanism still functioned, but the numbers had been altered slightly, forcing her to waste precious time between classes figuring out the new sequence. Inside her locker, Emma discovered that her textbooks had been rearranged in a way that seemed random, but was actually quite deliberate. Her chemistry book was missing entirely, and in its place was a note written on the same expensive stationery she had received the previous week. This message was more direct and threatening than its predecessor, abandoning any pretense of helpful concern. Academic fraud is a serious offense that can result in immediate expulsion and permanent notation. On transcripts sent to colleges, students who obtain grades through dishonest means should consider whether continuing at Oakwood High School is in their best interests. Some situations resolve themselves when people make appropriate choices about where they belong. The implicit threat was unmistakable. Rachel Morgan and her allies were no longer content with questioning Emma's capabilities. They were now suggesting that she should voluntarily withdraw from school rather than face formal accusations of cheating. The escalation represented a significant increase in the stakes of their conflict, moving from social harassment toward potential destruction of Emma's academic future. Emma photographed the note with her phone before placing it in the growing file of evidence she was maintaining, then spent her free period searching for her missing chemistry textbook. She eventually discovered it in a trash bin behind the gymnasium, water-damaged and covered with what appeared to be deliberately applied stains that made several crucial pages illegible. The destruction of her textbook represented both a practical problem and a symbolic message. Chemistry was Emma's strongest subject, and the damaged book would handicap her preparation for upcoming exams unless she could find a replacement. More importantly, the vandalism demonstrated that her tormentors were willing to escalate from psychological pressure to actual sabotage of her academic resources. During chemistry class, Emma was forced to share Dr. Martinez's personal copy of the textbook, a situation that clearly irritated the teacher and provided additional ammunition for those questioning her preparedness and academic seriousness. The humiliation was compounded when several students made loud observations about scholarship students being unable to afford proper materials, comments that were technically accurate but delivered with obvious malicious intent. Dr. Martinez's reaction to the textbook situation was particularly troubling. Instead of offering assistance or expressing concern about the circumstances that led to Emma needing to borrow materials, he seemed annoyed by the disruption to his classroom routine. His attitude suggested that someone had been planting suggestions about Emma's reliability and academic commitment, gradually poisoning his perception of a student who had previously been among his favorites. The lunch period brought another unwelcome surprise when Emma discovered that her usual refuge in the library was no longer available. Mrs. Patterson, the head librarian, informed her that new policies required all students eating lunch to remain in designated cafeteria areas unless they had specific research assignments requiring library access. The timing of this policy change was obviously not coincidental, representing another example of how administrative rules could be manipulated to target specific individuals. Forced to eat in the cafeteria for the first time since her arrival. At Oakwood High School, Emma chose a table in the far corner where she hoped to remain inconspicuous. Her strategy failed immediately as Rachel Morgan's voice carried clearly across the large room, delivering what appeared to be a casual observation, but was actually a carefully planned public humiliation. It's really sad when some people try so hard to fit in where they obviously don't belong. I mean, when you can't even afford basic school supplies, maybe you should consider whether this is really the right environment for you. The comment was delivered with perfect timing as Emma unwrapped her simple sandwich, surrounded by students eating elaborate meals from the cafeteria or expensive restaurants. The contrast between her humble lunch and the abundance displayed by her wealthier classmates had never been more obvious or more painful. Several students turned to look at Emma, their expressions ranging from curiosity to pity to outright hostility. She could feel her cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger, but forced herself to continue eating methodically while maintaining an appearance of indifference to the social dynamics swirling around her. Kelly Martinez appeared at Emma's table, without invitation, carrying her own lunch tray and settling into the seat across from her target of harassment. The gesture was small but significant, demonstrating public solidarity with someone who was being systematically isolated by the school's social elite. "Ignore them," Kelly said quietly, opening her own lunch while keeping her voice low enough to avoid attracting additional attention. "They're trying to provoke you into doing something that would give them an excuse to escalate their campaign against you." Emma nodded her understanding while continuing to eat, grateful for Kelly's support, but also aware that her new ally was now likely to become a target herself. Rachel Morgan's group was notorious for punishing anyone who interfered. With their social engineering projects, and Kelly's public association with Emma would not go unnoticed or unpunished. The afternoon brought confirmation of Emma's concerns when Kelly approached her after final period with obvious distress written across her face. Someone had hacked into the school newspaper's computer system and deleted several weeks' worth of articles Kelly had been preparing for the next edition. The timing and target of the cyber attack left no doubt about its motivation or perpetrators. "They got into my student government files too," Kelly reported, her voice tight with anger and frustration. 3 weeks of work on the Academic Integrity Committee report completely gone, and somehow my password was changed so I can't even access my own accounts. The retaliation against Kelly was swift and comprehensive, designed to send a clear message about the consequences of supporting Emma or interfering with the harassment campaign. The technical sophistication of the attack suggested professional-level hacking skills, probably provided by someone with connections to the technology industry. Emma felt responsible for Kelly's troubles, knowing that her new ally was suffering consequences for offering support and friendship. The guilt was compounded by the realization that Rachel's group possessed resources and capabilities that went far beyond typical high school social warfare. They were operating with adult-level planning and execution, backed by family wealth and connections that provided access to expertise and tools most students couldn't imagine. The walk to Master Kim's studio that afternoon was marked by a growing sense of urgency and concern. The harassment campaign was escalating rapidly, incorporating cyber warfare and administrative manipulation alongside traditional psychological pressure. Emma understood that she was facing opponents who were willing and able to destroy her academic career through any means necessary. Master Kim was conducting a private lesson with another student when Emma arrived, giving her time to observe. Advanced techniques being demonstrated to someone with several years of training. The other student was working on defensive moves against knife attacks, scenarios that Master Kim insisted all serious martial artists must be prepared to handle despite their disturbing implications. When her session began, Master Kim immediately focused on Emma's mental state rather than physical conditioning. He had her spend 20 minutes in meditation, working to achieve the emotional equilibrium necessary for clear thinking and effective decision-making under pressure. "Your enemies are escalating their campaign," he observed, though Emma had not yet described the day's events. "I can see the stress in your posture and breathing. Tell me what new developments have occurred." Emma recounted the textbook vandalism, the library restriction, the public humiliation in the cafeteria, and the cyber attack against Kelly Martinez. Master Kim listened with growing concern, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timing and methods that demonstrated his understanding of tactical warfare principles. "They are moving toward direct confrontation," he concluded. When Emma finished her report, "The psychological pressure and social isolation are intended to make you desperate and emotionally unstable. When they finally corner you physically, they expect you to be broken and helpless." Master Kim's analysis confirmed Emma's growing suspicion that the harassment campaign was building toward a climactic confrontation designed to destroy her completely. The systematic destruction of her support systems and academic resources was preparation for a final assault that would leave her with no choice but to flee Oakwood High School in defeat. "What they don't understand," Master Kim continued, "is that pressure creates diamonds. Every attack they make against you is also training for the moment when you will need to defend yourself completely. They are inadvertently preparing you for victory." The training session that afternoon was more intense than any Emma had previously experienced. Master Kim pushed her through advanced combat scenarios involving multiple attackers, weapons defense, and fighting in confined spaces. He also introduced psychological warfare techniques, teaching her how to project confidence and control even when facing overwhelming odds. "Your greatest weapon is not your physical skills," Master Kim explained as they practiced verbal de-escalation techniques. "It is the element of surprise. Your enemies expect you to be weak and frightened. When you demonstrate strength and capability, it will shatter their confidence and tactical planning." The lesson included specific guidance about legal aspects of self-defense, ensuring that Emma understood the difference between appropriate protective force and illegal assault. Master Kim emphasized that martial arts skills should only be used when facing imminent physical danger, and that the goal should always be neutralizing threats with minimal necessary force. As the session concluded, Master Kim provided Emma with a small device that looked like an ordinary pen, but was actually a high-quality voice recorder. He also gave her detailed instructions about documenting any future confrontations, including the importance of verbal warnings and attempts at de-escalation before resorting to physical defense. "The time is coming when you will need to make a choice," he warned, as Emma prepared to leave the studio. "You can continue to endure their harassment and hope it eventually stops, or you can take control of the situation and end it permanently. Either choice carries risks, but only one preserves your dignity and future." The evening at home provided an opportunity for Emma to process the day's events and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. Her mother was working a double shift at the diner, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts and her growing collection of evidence documenting the harassment campaign. Emma spent 2 hours updating her documentation, adding photographs of the damaged textbook, screenshots of the threatening note, and detailed accounts of the public humiliation and cyber attacks. The file was becoming substantial enough to support formal complaints to law enforcement, though she doubted that local authorities would take action against the children of prominent families without overwhelming evidence. Her homework routine was disrupted by the need to compensate for the damaged chemistry textbook, forcing her to rely on online resources and library materials to complete assignments that should have been straightforward. The extra time and effort required was exactly what her tormentors intended, creating additional stress while undermining her academic performance. As Emma prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about Master Kim's final warning about making a choice between continued endurance and taking control. She understood that her patience and strategic approach had allowed her to gather valuable intelligence about her enemy's methods and capabilities, but it had also permitted the harassment to escalate to dangerous levels. The decision she faced was not just about personal dignity or social dynamics. It was about whether she would allow privileged bullies to destroy her educational opportunities and force her family back into the cycle of poverty they had worked so hard to escape. Her mother's sacrifices and dreams were at stake alongside her own future prospects. Emma's final thoughts before falling asleep centered on the realization that she was approaching a moment of truth that would define not only her remaining time at Oakwood High School, but potentially the entire trajectory of her life. The harassment campaign was designed to break her spirit and drive her away, but it was instead forging her into someone capable of fighting back with devastating effectiveness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and escalating pressure, but Emma felt a growing sense of readiness for whatever confrontation lay ahead. The warrior within her was fully awakened now, armed with documentation, allies, tactical knowledge, and 7 years of combat training. Rachel Morgan and her privileged allies had chosen their target poorly, and they were about to discover the difference between inherited privilege and earned strength. The quiet scholarship student they thought they could intimidate was preparing to show them what real power looked like when it was backed by justice, preparation, and the absolute refusal to surrender to injustice. The final confrontation was approaching, and Emma Thompson was ready for whatever form it might take. The confrontation came on a grey Friday afternoon in late October, when the autumn sky hung heavy with the promise of an early winter storm. Emma had stayed after school to make up a chemistry lab that she had missed due to her damaged textbook situation, working alone in the empty science wing while most students had already departed for their weekend activities. The isolation was intentional on her part, a strategic choice to avoid potential conflicts during what had become an increasingly hostile daily environment. Dr. Martinez had reluctantly allowed her to complete the makeup work, though his attitude had grown noticeably cooler over recent weeks as the whisper campaign about her academic integrity continued to influence faculty perceptions. Emma worked methodically through the complex chemical analysis, documenting each step with the precision that had always characterized her academic performance, even as she remained hyper-aware of her surroundings and potential threats. The science. Wing's location in the oldest part of Oakwood High School made it particularly isolated after hours, with limited security camera coverage and minimal foot traffic from custodial staff or remaining faculty members. Emma had chosen this location specifically because it provided the privacy she needed to complete her work without interference. But she also understood that the isolation could be dangerous if her tormentors decided to escalate their campaign beyond psychological warfare. As Emma packed her laboratory materials and prepared to leave the building, she heard voices echoing from the hallway outside the chemistry classroom. The sounds were muffled by the heavy wooden door, but she recognized the cadence and tone of Rachel Morgan's voice, accompanied by what sounded like her 3 constant companions. Their presence in the science wing after normal school hours was highly unusual and immediately set off every alarm bell that Master Kim had trained her to recognize. Emma quickly activated the voice recorder Master Kim had given her, tucking the device into her jacket pocket where it would capture audio while remaining concealed from casual observation. She also sent a quick text message to Kelly Martinez with her location and a brief warning about potential trouble. though she doubted that her friend would receive the message in time to provide assistance if the situation deteriorated rapidly. The voices in the hallway grew louder and more distinct as their owners approached the chemistry classroom. Emma could now clearly distinguish Rachel's imperious tone, giving instructions to her companions, coordinating what sounded like a carefully planned operation rather than a spontaneous encounter. The level of organization and preparation suggested that this confrontation had been anticipated and rehearsed, representing the culmination of weeks of strategic planning. "Remember, we're just having a conversation about academic standards and appropriate behavior," Rachel's voice carried clearly through the door. "If she gets upset or aggressive, that's her choice, but we're just concerned students trying to maintain the integrity of our school's reputation." The prepared narrative was obviously designed to provide cover for whatever they intended to do, while ensuring that any reports of the incident would portray them as reasonable students responding to Emma's inappropriate behavior. The sophistication of their planning demonstrated that they understood the importance of controlling the story that would emerge from their confrontation. Emma positioned herself near the back of the classroom, where she would have multiple escape routes and clear sightlines to observe anyone entering the room. Her body automatically shifted into the balanced stance Master Kim had drilled into her over thousands of training sessions, ready to move in any direction with maximum speed and efficiency. The mental calmness that accompanied her physical preparation was a testament to years of disciplined practice under pressure. The classroom door opened slowly, revealing Rachel Morgan silhouetted against the dimly lit hallway behind her. She entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to controlling every situation she encountered, her expensive clothing and perfectly styled appearance projecting an aura of untouchable privilege and social authority. Her three companions followed in formation, positioning themselves to block potential escape routes while maintaining plausible deniability about their intentions. Megan Clark moved to block the main doorway, her position appearing casual but actually preventing Emma from leaving through the most obvious exit. Sophia Davis positioned herself near the emergency exit door, ostensibly examining her manicured nails while actually ensuring that Emma couldn't flee through the fire escape route. Lauren White remained standing near the teacher's desk, her athletic build and predatory smile suggesting someone who was prepared for and perhaps hoping for physical confrontation. "Emma Thompson," Rachel announced, her voice carrying the mock formality of someone conducting official business. "We need to have a serious conversation about your continued presence at Oakwood High School and the problems you've been creating for the academic community here." The opening statement was calculated to provoke either defensive anger or submissive fear, both of which would serve Rachel's purposes by justifying whatever escalation she had planned. Emma remained silent and motionless, understanding that any response would be used against her while she assessed the tactical situation and waited for her opponents to reveal their true intentions. "You see," Rachel continued, moving closer while maintaining what appeared to be a conversational tone, "there have been concerns raised about the methods you've been using to achieve your academic performance. Some people think that scholarship students like you might be receiving inappropriate assistance or taking advantage of reduced standards." The accusation was delivered with false sympathy, as if Rachel was reluctantly sharing troubling information rather than orchestrating a deliberate character assassination. The performance was skillful enough to sound plausible to any adult who might later hear a recording, while the underlying message was clearly designed to humiliate and intimidate Emma into submission. Emma's silence seemed to frustrate Rachel, who had obviously expected either tearful denials or angry protests that could be used to justify further aggression. The lack of response forced her to escalate more quickly than she might have preferred, abandoning subtlety in favor of more direct psychological assault. "The truth is," Rachel said, her voice hardening with genuine malice. "Everyone knows you don't belong here. This school is for families who have earned their place through generations of achievement and community leadership. People like you are just taking spots that rightfully belong to students whose families have actually contributed to society." The mask was finally slipping, revealing the raw prejudice and entitlement that motivated the harassment campaign. Rachel's words carried the casual cruelty of someone who had never questioned her own privilege or considered the possibility that merit might be more important than inherited advantage. Sophia Davis decided to contribute her own observations, apparently feeling that the conversation needed additional venom. "It's really pathetic how some people will do anything for attention. Making up stories about harassment, playing the victim. God, acting like other people are responsible for their obvious inadequacies." The gaslighting attempt was particularly insidious, designed to make Emma question her own perceptions and experiences while simultaneously denying the reality of the systematic campaign that had been waged against her. The strategy relied on the assumption that repeated lies would eventually overcome documented truth. Lauren White stepped forward with obvious anticipation, her body language suggesting someone who was eager to move beyond verbal confrontation toward physical intimidation. "Maybe it's time for a more direct demonstration of where you really stand in the social hierarchy here. Some lessons need to be taught in ways that people remember permanently." The threat was now explicit and immediate, crossing the line from psychological harassment into assault planning. Emma understood that she was facing the moment Master Kim had prepared her for, when her martial arts skills would become necessary for her physical protection and possibly her survival. Megan Clark pulled out her smartphone and activated the camera function, obviously intending to record whatever humiliation they had planned for Emma. The presence of the camera confirmed that they intended to create permanent evidence of her degradation, probably for distribution through social media, to ensure maximum damage to her reputation and emotional well-being. "Here's what's going to happen," Rachel announced, her voice now carrying undisguised authority and malice. "You're going to get on your hands and knees, crawl to that corner where you belong, and eat the dirt from the floor, while admitting that you're not worthy to attend this school with your betters. We're going to record every second of it, and if you ever try to compete academically with us again, the video goes viral." The demand was designed to be so degrading and humiliating that Emma would be psychologically destroyed, regardless of whether she complied or refused. If she submitted, the recorded evidence would provide permanent leverage over her and serve as proof of her supposed inferiority. If she refused, they would escalate to physical force while claiming that she had been uncooperative and aggressive. Emma finally broke her silence, her voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "That's not going to happen. You need to leave this room immediately, and you need to stop harassing me and other students." The reasonable response was calculated to establish her attempts at peaceful resolution while clearly stating her boundaries. Master Kim had emphasized the importance of verbal warnings and de-escalation attempts before resorting to physical defense, both for legal protection and moral clarity. Rachel's face twisted with anger at Emma's refusal to submit to her authority. The defiance represented a fundamental challenge to the social order she believed in, where people knew their place and accepted their position without question or resistance. "You don't get to make demands here," Rachel snarled, abandoning any pretense of reasonableness. "You're nobody from nowhere, and it's time you learned to accept reality." Lauren White moved toward Emma with obvious aggressive intent, her hands reaching out to grab and force her into the degrading position they had demanded. The physical contact represented the legal threshold Master Kim had warned her about, the moment when self-defense became not only justified, but necessary. Emma's response was instantaneous and overwhelming. Years of training under Master Kim's demanding instruction had prepared her for exactly this scenario, and her body moved with the fluid precision of someone who had practiced these techniques thousands of times under pressure. Lauren's attempted grab met nothing but empty air as Emma stepped aside with minimal effort, using her opponent's momentum against her. The counterattack came so quickly that Lauren barely had time to register what was happening before she found herself on her knees, her wrist locked in a submission hold that brought immediate and intense pain without causing permanent damage. Emma maintained the hold just long enough to demonstrate complete control before releasing her opponent and stepping back to a defensive position. 7 years of martial arts training, Emma said calmly, her voice carrying a new note of authority that none of them had heard before. Second-degree black belt in multiple disciplines, regional sparring champion, Master Kim's self-defense, studio downtown. The revelation hit Rachel's group like a physical blow, shattering every assumption they had made about Emma's capabilities and vulnerability. The quiet scholarship student they had been tormenting was actually a highly trained fighter, capable of defending herself against multiple attackers with potentially devastating effectiveness. Lauren struggled to her feet, nursing her wrist, and staring at Emma with a mixture of shock, pain, and newfound respect. The casual confidence she had displayed moments earlier was completely gone, replaced by the uncertainty of someone who had just discovered that their intended victim was actually a dangerous opponent. Megan Clark's smartphone trembled in her hands as she realized that she had been recording evidence of their own aggressive behavior rather than Emma's humiliation. The video would show Lauren attempting to physically force Emma into a degrading position, followed by a textbook example of appropriate self-defense that demonstrated both restraint and skill. Sophia Davis backed toward the emergency exit, apparently recognizing that the tactical situation had shifted dramatically against them. Her earlier bravado evaporated as she understood that they were no longer dealing with a helpless victim, but with someone who possessed the skills and training to protect herself effectively. Rachel Morgan stood frozen in the center of the classroom, her mind struggling to process the complete reversal of power dynamics that had just occurred. Everything she thought she knew about social hierarchies and personal strength had been proven wrong in the space of a few seconds. "Here's what's actually going to happen," Emma said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who now controlled the situation completely. "You're going to delete any recordings you've made. You're going to stop harassing me and every other student you've been targeting. You're going to publicly apologize for the lies you've spread about my academic integrity, and you're going to leave me alone permanently." The demands were reasonable but non-negotiable, delivered with the confidence of someone who had demonstrated the capability to enforce them if necessary. Emma's transformation from victim to victor was complete, achieved through preparation, strategic thinking, and the willingness to defend herself when peaceful options were exhausted. Megan stammered something about their family's influence and connections, apparently hoping that threats of retaliation would restore their lost authority. But the words lacked conviction, delivered by someone who no longer believed in her own power after witnessing its limitations when confronted by genuine strength. "Your family's money and connections won't protect you from the consequences of assault, harassment, and attempted coercion," Emma replied, pulling out her own recording device to show them that their entire attack had been documented. "This entire conversation is recorded, including your demands that I crawl and eat dirt while you filmed it. I also have months of evidence documenting your systematic harassment campaign. The threat of legal consequences was far more serious than any social embarrassment they might face. Emma's documentation would support criminal charges for harassment, intimidation, and assault, charges that even their family's influence might not be able to make disappear entirely." Rachel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation, threatening Emma's scholarship and academic future through her family's connections to the school administration. But the words rang hollow, delivered by someone who had just been definitively outmaneuvered by an opponent she had underestimated completely. "My academic record speaks for itself," Emma responded with quiet confidence. "My grades are earned through hard work and genuine ability, not family connections or inherited privilege. Any investigation of my academic integrity will only confirm what everyone already knows, that I belong here because I've earned it." The confrontation ended not with violence or dramatic gestures, but with the simple reality that Rachel's group no longer possessed any credible threat to wield against Emma. Their campaign of psychological warfare had been based on the assumption that she was weak and isolated, assumptions that had been thoroughly disproven when they finally pushed her into a corner. One by one, Rachel's companions filed out of the classroom, their earlier confidence replaced by the subdued demeanor of people who had just learned an important lesson about the difference between inherited privilege and earned strength. Rachel herself was the last to leave, her face showing the confusion of someone whose entire worldview had been challenged and found wanting. Emma remained in the classroom for several minutes after they departed, allowing her adrenaline to subside, while processing what had just occurred. The confrontation she had been preparing for over months of escalating harassment was finally over, resolved not through violence, but through the demonstration of capability backed by justice and moral clarity. The documentation she had gathered over months of systematic harassment would ensure that Rachel's group faced appropriate consequences for their behavior, while her academic record would continue to speak for itself through genuine achievement, rather than inherited advantage. Most importantly, other students who had been targeted by similar campaigns would now understand that victims could become victors when they refused to accept the roles that bullies tried to impose upon them. Emma's transformation was complete. The quiet scholarship student who had arrived at Oakwood High School, seeking only to earn her education in peace, had become a symbol of resistance against privilege and entitlement. Her story would inspire countless others to stand up for justice, while her documented methods would provide a blueprint for defending against systematic harassment campaigns. The warrior within her had awakened not through anger or hatred, but through the recognition that some battles must be fought to protect not only herself, but everyone who came after her. Master Kim's lessons about appropriate force, strategic thinking, and moral courage had prepared her for this moment, and she had proven worthy of his training. As Emma finally gathered her belongings and prepared to leave Oakwood High School that Friday afternoon, she understood that her victory was about much more than stopping her own harassment. She had demonstrated that bullies, regardless of their wealth or connections, were ultimately powerless when confronted by someone who possessed genuine strength, thorough preparation, and the absolute refusal to surrender to injustice. The lesson would resonate throughout the school and beyond. True power comes not from privilege or position, but from the courage to do what's right, even when facing overwhelming opposition. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is actually the most dangerous opponent you could ever choose to face. And sometimes justice arrives not through official channels, but through the actions of individuals who refuse to be broken by those who mistake inherited advantage for genuine superiority. The immediate aftermath of the chemistry classroom confrontation rippled through Oakwood High School like an earthquake, fundamentally altering the social landscape that had seemed so immutable. Just days before, word of Emma Thompson's devastating response to Rachel Morgan's harassment campaign spread through unofficial channels with the speed that only truly shocking revelations could achieve, carried by whispered conversations in hallways and encrypted messages between students who had witnessed the elite group's sudden and complete downfall. Monday morning brought a transformed environment where the carefully maintained social hierarchies that had governed student interactions for years were suddenly called into question. Emma noticed the change immediately as she walked through the front entrance, observing how conversations paused differently when she passed, how the glances that followed her movement now carried respect rather than contempt, and how several students who had previously avoided her now nodded acknowledgement or offered tentative smiles of support. Rachel Morgan's absence from her usual position near the main bulletin board was conspicuous and telling. For the first time since the beginning of the school year, the prime social real estate remained unoccupied during the morning rush, a power vacuum that no other group seemed willing or able to fill. The message was clear to anyone who understood the subtle dynamics of high school politics. The untouchable elite had been touched, and their reign of social terror was effectively over. Emma's first period advanced placement literature class provided an early indication of how dramatically faculty perceptions had shifted following the weekend's revelations. Mrs. Rodriguez greeted her with a warmth that had been absent during recent weeks when the whisper campaign about academic dishonesty had poisoned professional relationships. The teacher's attitude suggested that she had received information that completely contradicted the negative narratives that had been circulated about Emma's character and capabilities. During the class discussion of To Kill a Mockingbird, Emma found herself able to participate freely without the undercurrent of hostility that had characterized recent academic exchanges. Her insights about justice, moral courage, and standing up to institutional prejudice resonated powerfully with classmates who now understood that she was speaking from personal experience rather than merely analyzing fictional scenarios. The transformation was most evident in the behavior of students who had previously either actively participated in or passively enabled the harassment campaign against her. Several classmates who had made snide comments about scholarship students or academic integrity now seemed eager to distance themselves from those positions, offering friendly greetings and expressions of support that suggested they were reconsidering their previous allegiances. Kelly Martinez approached Emma between classes with news that confirmed the broader implications of Friday's confrontation. The cyber attacks against the school newspaper and student government files had suddenly ceased, and Kelly had received anonymous tips pointing toward the sources of the technical sabotage that had plagued her work for weeks. It's amazing how quickly people develop civic responsibility when they realize there might be consequences for their actions, Kelly observed, with barely concealed satisfaction. I've gotten 3 separate messages offering information about who was behind the hacking, plus someone left a flash drive with recovered files in my locker. The restoration of Kelly's work represented more than simple technical assistance. It demonstrated that the network of passive enablers who had allowed Rachel's group to operate with impunity was now actively working to undo the damage they had helped create. The shift in allegiances reflected a fundamental change in the power dynamics that governed student interactions. Emma's chemistry class provided perhaps the most dramatic evidence of how completely the situation had transformed. Dr. Martinez greeted her with professional respect and offered a new copy of the textbook to replace the one that had been vandalized, along with an apology for any inconvenience she had experienced due to equipment problems. His careful phrasing suggested that he now understood the true nature of the difficulties she had faced while maintaining plausible deniability about his previous suspicions. More significantly, Dr. Martinez announced that the class would be implementing new policies to prevent academic sabotage and ensure that all students had equal access to educational resources. The timing and specificity of these changes made it clear that school administration had received detailed information about the harassment campaign and was taking steps to prevent similar situations in the future. During lunch period, Emma was surprised to find herself with more social options than she had experienced since arriving at Oakwood High School. The library restriction that had forced her into the cafeteria had been quietly rescinded, but she chose to remain in the more public setting where she could observe the continuing fallout from her confrontation with Rachel's group. The cafeteria dynamics had shifted dramatically, with former victims of elite harassment now sitting together in a loose coalition that provided mutual support and protection. Emma found herself welcomed into this group not as a fellow victim, but as someone who had demonstrated that effective resistance was possible when combined with proper preparation and moral courage. The conversations around her table focused on practical strategies for documenting harassment, building support networks, and ensuring that the positive changes initiated by her example would become permanent features of the school environment. These discussions revealed the extent to which systematic bullying had affected the academic and social experiences of numerous students who had previously suffered in isolation. Among the most significant revelations was the discovery that Rachel's group had been operating similar harassment campaigns against at least 6 other students over the past 2 years, using identical tactics of social isolation, academic sabotage, and psychological warfare to drive away anyone who challenged their perceived superiority. The pattern of abuse was far more extensive and systematic than Emma had realized, representing a genuine conspiracy to exclude students based on economic background, academic ability, or simple refusal to acknowledge elite social authority. The documentation that Emma had gathered over months of careful observation suddenly became part of a much larger body of evidence that painted a picture of institutional bullying enabled by administrative indifference and family privilege. When combined with testimonies from other victims and the recorded evidence from Friday's confrontation, the material provided overwhelming proof of criminal harassment that even the most influential parents would struggle to dismiss or minimize. Wednesday brought the first official acknowledgement from school administration that significant policy changes were being implemented in response to recent concerns about student welfare and academic integrity. Principal Davidson announced during morning announcements that new reporting procedures would be established for harassment complaints, with external oversight to ensure that family connections or donations would not influence disciplinary decisions. The announcement was carefully worded to avoid admitting institutional failure, while clearly indicating that the protection systems that had shielded privileged students from consequences were being dismantled. Emma understood that her documented evidence and strategic approach had created legal and political pressure that forced administrative action despite the preferences of influential families. More importantly, Principal Davidson announced that Oakwood High School would be participating in a county-wide initiative to address economic discrimination and ensure equal educational opportunities for students from all backgrounds. The program would include sensitivity training for faculty and staff, enhanced support services for scholarship recipients, and anonymous reporting systems that bypassed traditional administrative channels. Emma's afternoon training session with Master Kim took on a different character as they discussed the broader implications of her successful defense against systematic harassment. Master Kim expressed pride in her strategic thinking and restraint, noting that she had achieved victory through minimal force, combined with thorough preparation and moral clarity. "You have learned the most important lesson of martial arts," Master Kim observed as they concluded their session with meditation and reflection. "True strength is not about dominating others, but about protecting yourself and those who cannot protect themselves. Your victory serves justice rather than ego." The conversation touched on the responsibilities that came with her newfound influence within the school community. Students who had been victims of similar harassment campaigns were looking to her for guidance and support, creating opportunities to build lasting positive change, while also requiring careful consideration of how her example might be used or misused by others. Master Kim emphasized that her martial arts skills had been revealed not through aggression or showing off, but through necessity when peaceful options were exhausted. This distinction was crucial for maintaining the ethical foundation of her actions and ensuring that other students understood the appropriate circumstances for using similar defensive techniques. Thursday brought confirmation that the consequences for Rachel's group were more severe and far-reaching than anyone had anticipated. Megan Clark's father quietly removed her from Oakwood High School and enrolled her in a private institution in another county, apparently recognizing that his daughter's reputation and future prospects had been irreparably damaged by her participation in the harassment campaign. Sophia Davis faced suspension and mandatory counseling after her parents were confronted with video evidence of her role in attempting to force Emma into degrading positions while threatening to distribute humiliating recordings. The legal implications of such behavior had apparently shocked her family into recognizing the seriousness of the situation and the need for immediate intervention. Lauren White's athletic aspirations suffered a devastating blow when college recruiters withdrew scholarship offers after learning about her involvement in systematic harassment and attempted assault. The incident demonstrated that consequences for privileged misconduct could extend far beyond high school social dynamics into future educational and career opportunities. Rachel Morgan herself had not returned to school since Friday's confrontation, and rumors suggested that her family was considering relocating to another state to escape the social and legal ramifications of her leadership role in the harassment conspiracy. The possibility that the most powerful student at Oakwood High School might be forced to flee represented a complete reversal of the power dynamics that had seemed unshakable just weeks earlier. Emma's academic performance flourished in the absence of constant harassment and sabotage, with her grades returning to the perfect levels that reflected her true capabilities rather than the artificial struggles created by her tormentors. Teachers who had been influenced by whispered accusations about her integrity now competed to offer additional opportunities and support for her educational advancement. The chemistry makeup work that had led to Friday's confrontation resulted in her best performance of the semester, earning praise from Dr. Martinez and cementing her position as the top student in advanced placement sciences. The symbolic significance was not lost on Emma or her classmates. The very subject that had been used to question her academic worthiness had become the arena where her excellence was most clearly demonstrated. Friday's one-week anniversary of the confrontation brought an unexpected development when Principal Davidson called Emma to his office for a private meeting. She entered the administrative suite with some trepidation, uncertain whether this represented recognition for her achievements or concern about the methods she had used to defend herself. Principal Davidson's office was decorated with photographs and plaques celebrating the academic and athletic achievements of Oakwood High School's most successful graduates, many of whom came from the same privileged families that had enabled the harassment campaign against Emma. The irony was not lost on her as she sat across from an administrator who was now forced to acknowledge that merit rather than privilege should determine student success. "Miss Thompson," Principal Davidson began, his tone formal but respectful, "I want to personally apologize for the difficulties you've experienced during your time at Oakwood High School. It's clear that our existing systems failed to protect you from unacceptable treatment, and we're implementing comprehensive changes to ensure that no student faces similar challenges in the future." The apology was significant, not only for its acknowledgement of institutional failure, but also for its recognition that Emma's treatment had been unacceptable rather than simply unfortunate. The distinction indicated that school administration now understood the systematic nature of the harassment campaign and their responsibility for allowing it to continue unchecked. Principal Davidson continued by offering Emma several opportunities that reflected both her academic achievements and her demonstrated leadership capabilities. These included early admission to advanced placement courses, recommendation letters for competitive scholarship programs, and the chance to serve on student committees addressing harassment prevention and academic integrity. Most significantly, he informed her that Oakwood High School would be nominating her for a prestigious state award, recognizing students who had demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership in promoting educational equity. The nomination would highlight her academic achievements alongside her role in exposing and ending systematic discrimination against scholarship recipients. The meeting concluded with Principal Davidson's assurance that the changes implemented in response to her situation would become permanent features of school policy rather than temporary adjustments. Emma understood that her documented approach and strategic persistence had created lasting institutional reform that would protect future students from similar harassment campaigns. As Emma left the administrative office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from isolated victim to recognized leader in just a few months. The transformation had required not only personal courage and martial arts skills, but also strategic thinking, careful documentation, and the willingness to stand up for principles even when facing overwhelming opposition. The weekend brought congratulations from Master Kim, who presented her with a special recognition for demonstrating the highest ideals of martial arts through her combination of physical skill, mental discipline, and moral courage. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, acknowledging that her victory represented more than personal success. It demonstrated how individual strength could create positive change for entire communities. Emma's mother wept with pride when she learned the full story of her daughter's trials and ultimate triumph, understanding that all their sacrifices and struggles had produced not just academic success, but genuine character development and leadership capability. The phone call from Stanford University's admissions office, offering early acceptance with full scholarship support, provided tangible evidence that Emma's future remained bright, despite the challenges she had overcome. The following Monday brought the beginning of Emma's senior year second semester, with a transformed social environment that reflected the positive changes her courage had initiated. New students felt welcomed rather than threatened. Scholarship recipients received support rather than discrimination, and the culture of privilege and entitlement that had poisoned academic competition gave way to recognition of merit and genuine achievement. Emma's story became part of Oakwood High School's unofficial legend, passed down through student networks as an example of how victims could become victors when they refused to accept injustice passively. Her methods of documentation, strategic patience, and appropriate response became templates for other students facing similar challenges at schools throughout the county. The ripple effects extended beyond high school boundaries as her documented approach influenced policy discussions at the state level about preventing economic discrimination in educational settings. Academic conferences featured presentations about the Thompson method of harassment documentation and resistance, spreading her strategic insights to educational professionals nationwide. Years later, when Emma had graduated from Stanford with highest honors and begun her career in biomedical research, she would receive messages from students across the country who had used her example to overcome their own harassment campaigns. The quiet scholarship student who had just wanted to earn her education in peace had become a symbol of resistance against privilege and prejudice, inspiring countless others to stand up for justice. Master Kim's final lesson about the responsibilities that come with strength had proven prophetic. Emma's martial arts skills had been revealed for only a few seconds during one crucial confrontation. But the principles behind those skills, moral courage, strategic thinking, and absolute refusal to surrender to injustice, had created changes that would benefit thousands of students for generations to come. The transformation of Oakwood High School, from a bastion of privilege into a genuine meritocracy, demonstrated that individual courage could indeed challenge and change institutional discrimination. Emma's victory had been achieved not through anger or hatred, but through preparation, patience, and the recognition that some battles must be fought to protect not only yourself, but everyone who comes after you. The lesson resonated far beyond one high school in Westfield County. True power comes not from inherited advantage or family connections, but from the strength to do what's right, even when facing overwhelming opposition. Sometimes the quietest person in the room possesses the greatest capacity for positive change, and sometimes justice arrives not through official channels, but through the actions of individuals who refuse to be broken by those who mistake wealth for worth. Emma Thompson's journey from victim to victor became proof that bullies, regardless of their privilege or protection, ultimately cannot prevail against someone who combines genuine strength with moral courage and strategic intelligence. Her story continues to inspire those who face their own battles against injustice, demonstrating that preparation, persistence, and principled action can overcome even the most entrenched systems of oppression and discrimination. 5 years after the chemistry classroom confrontation that transformed Oakwood High School, Emma Thompson stood in the gleaming laboratories of Stanford University's biomedical research facility, her white coat bearing the title Dr. Emma Thompson, Ph.D., as she prepared to present her groundbreaking research on neural pathway reconstruction to an international conference of medical professionals. The journey from scholarship student defending herself against privileged bullies to respected scientist at the forefront of her field represented more than personal achievement. It embodied the triumph of merit over inherited advantage and demonstrated the far-reaching consequences of refusing to surrender to injustice. The invitation to speak at the Global Medical Innovation Summit had arrived 3 months earlier. Recognizing Emma's revolutionary work on treating traumatic brain injuries through regenerative therapy techniques. Her research had attracted attention from medical institutions worldwide, with practical applications that promised to restore cognitive function to patients previously considered beyond help. The irony was not lost on Emma that her work focused on healing minds damaged by trauma, given her own experience overcoming psychological warfare designed to break her spirit. Stanford's campus bustled with the energy of ambitious students and dedicated researchers, but Emma still remembered the isolation and hostility she had faced at Oakwood High School, when academic excellence was viewed as a threat rather than an achievement worth celebrating. The contrast between environments that punished merit and those that rewarded it had shaped her understanding of how institutional culture could either enable or eliminate the systematic discrimination that prevented talented individuals from reaching their potential. Dr. Sarah Kim, Emma's research supervisor and mentor, approached her laboratory workstation with the latest results from their clinical trials, her expression reflecting the excitement that came with breakthrough discoveries that would benefit countless patients. Worldwide, Dr. Kim had become more than a professional colleague. She represented the kind of supportive guidance that Emma had lacked during her high school years, when teachers questioned her integrity rather than nurturing her obvious capabilities. The neural regeneration data exceeded all our projections, Dr. Kim announced, spreading the results across Emma's desk for review. Patient recovery rates are approaching 90% for injuries that were previously considered permanent, and the cognitive restoration is maintaining stability even after treatment protocols conclude. Emma studied the data with the methodical precision that had characterized her academic approach since childhood, recognizing that their research would revolutionize treatment options for brain injury patients while validating years of theoretical work that many colleagues had initially dismissed as overly ambitious. The success represented vindication not only for their scientific hypotheses, but also for the principle that innovative thinking should be encouraged rather than suppressed by institutional conservatism. The preparation for her conference presentation required Emma to reflect on the personal journey that had brought her to this moment of professional recognition, acknowledging how the challenges she had overcome at Oakwood High School had strengthened her determination to succeed while developing the strategic thinking skills that now benefited her research methodology. The systematic harassment she had endured had taught her to document everything meticulously, anticipate opposition strategies, and maintain focus on long-term objectives despite short-term setbacks. Her presentation would address not only the technical aspects of neural regeneration therapy, but also the broader implications for medical education and research funding policies that often favored established researchers from prestigious backgrounds over innovative approaches developed by newcomers to the field. Emma understood that her platform at the conference provided an opportunity to advocate for merit-based evaluation systems that could identify and support breakthrough research regardless of its institutional origins. The telephone call from Kelly Martinez, now a successful investigative journalist for the Washington Post, brought news that connected Emma's current achievements to the continuing impact of her high school experiences. Kelly had been researching a series of articles about educational discrimination and systematic harassment in elite academic institutions, discovering that the problems they had confronted at Oakwood High School existed in similar forms at schools and universities throughout the country. Your documentation methods have become the gold standard for harassment victims seeking legal remedies, Kelly reported during their conversation, her voice carrying the professional authority she had developed through years of investigative reporting. Civil rights attorneys are using the Thompson Protocol to help students build cases against institutional discrimination, and the success rate for achieving policy changes has increased dramatically. The revelation that her strategic approach to gathering evidence had become a recognized methodology for combating educational discrimination provided Emma with satisfaction that extended beyond personal vindication. The techniques she had developed out of necessity during her darkest periods at Oakwood High School were now protecting countless other students from similar persecution, while holding institutions accountable for enabling systematic harassment campaigns. Kelly's articles had also uncovered the long-term consequences faced by Rachel Morgan and her accomplices, revealing how their harassment campaign had ultimately destroyed their own prospects rather than achieving their intended goal of eliminating competition from scholarship students. Rachel had struggled academically at 3 different private schools, never recovering the confidence and social authority she had wielded at Oakwood High School before encountering someone who refused to be intimidated by inherited privilege. Megan Clark had eventually graduated from a mediocre private institution with minimal academic distinction, her college applications having been damaged by disciplinary records that followed her despite her family's attempts to suppress information about her role in systematic harassment campaigns. The experience had apparently taught her harsh lessons about the limits of parental influence when confronted with documented evidence of criminal behavior. Sophia Davis had faced the most severe consequences, with her social media warfare expertise leading to federal cybercrime charges when her harassment techniques were applied to targets beyond high school boundaries. Her conviction for digital stalking and identity theft had resulted in a criminal record that eliminated her prospects for admission to reputable colleges or employment with companies that conducted thorough background investigations. Lauren White's athletic career had ended permanently after college recruiters learned about her involvement in attempting to force students into degrading positions while threatening to distribute humiliating recordings. The incident had been classified as attempted sexual assault by prosecutors, creating legal consequences that extended far beyond the social embarrassment her family had initially expected to manage through influence and financial resources. The contrast between Emma's ascending trajectory and the declining fortunes of her former tormentors illustrated the fundamental difference between achievements built on merit versus those dependent on privilege and intimidation. While Emma's success stemmed from genuine capability enhanced by strategic thinking and moral courage, her opponent's downfall resulted from their inability to function effectively when their artificial advantages were removed and they faced consequences for their actions. Emma's research laboratory had become a destination for visiting scholars and graduate students from around the world, drawn by her innovative approaches to neural regeneration and her reputation for mentoring young researchers with the same supportive guidance she had wished for during her own academic development. The collaborative environment she fostered stood in stark contrast to the competitive hostility that had characterized her high school experience. Among her current research team was David Chen, a first-generation college student whose family had emigrated from Vietnam with nothing but determination to build better lives through education and hard work. David's background reminded Emma of her own struggles with economic disadvantage and social prejudice, creating opportunities for her to provide the kind of mentorship and advocacy that could prevent talented individuals from being derailed by systematic discrimination. Dr. Thompson, David approached her with the latest results from their experimental trials, his voice carrying the excitement of someone whose theoretical predictions were being validated through empirical research. The protein synthesis rates are maintaining stability across all test subjects, and we're seeing sustained improvement in cognitive function even 6 months after treatment completion. Emma reviewed David's meticulous documentation with approval, recognizing the same attention to detail and strategic thinking that had served her well during her own challenges with hostile environments. She had deliberately chosen research team members who demonstrated not only scientific capability, but also the resilience and strategic intelligence necessary to overcome institutional barriers that might impede their professional development. The upcoming medical conference would provide Emma with a platform to address not only the technical aspects of her research, but also the broader systemic issues that prevented many talented individuals from contributing to scientific advancement. Her presentation would advocate for research funding policies that prioritized innovative approaches over institutional prestige, creating opportunities for breakthrough discoveries that might emerge from unexpected sources. The invitation to serve as keynote speaker at Oakwood High School's Academic Excellence Ceremony had arrived with a personal note from Principal Davidson, now nearing retirement after implementing comprehensive policy reforms that had transformed the institution's culture from one of privilege and entitlement to genuine meritocracy. The ceremony would recognize graduating seniors who had demonstrated exceptional achievement despite facing significant challenges, honoring the principal that academic success should be measured by effort and capability rather than family background. Emma's acceptance of the speaking invitation represented both personal closure and an opportunity to inspire current students who might be facing their own battles against discrimination and systematic harassment. Her presence would demonstrate that victims could indeed become victors when they combined strategic thinking with moral courage and refused to accept limitations imposed by those who mistook inherited advantage for genuine superiority. The speech preparation required Emma to reflect on the lessons she had learned during her transformation from isolated victim to internationally recognized researcher, identifying the principles and strategies that could benefit others facing similar challenges. Her message would emphasize the importance of documentation, strategic patience, building alliances with principled individuals, and maintaining focus on long-term objectives despite short-term setbacks. Master Kim, now in his 70s but still teaching martial arts to students who sought not only physical skills but also mental discipline and moral guidance, had followed Emma's career with the pride of someone whose teachings had been validated. Through his students' achievements, their relationship had evolved from teacher and student to colleagues united by shared principles about the appropriate use of strength and the responsibility to protect those who could not protect themselves. Your greatest victory was not the confrontation in the chemistry classroom, Master Kim observed during one of their periodic conversations about the broader implications of her journey. It was your decision to use that experience as a foundation for creating positive change, rather than allowing it to generate hatred and desire for revenge. The wisdom in Master Kim's observation reflected years of teaching students who faced various forms of adversity, helping them understand that true martial arts mastery involved not only physical techniques, but also the emotional regulation and strategic thinking necessary to achieve just outcomes through appropriate means. Emma's success demonstrated the practical applications of these principles in contexts that extended far beyond traditional combat scenarios. The biomedical research that now occupied Emma's professional focus had been shaped by her understanding of systematic trauma and recovery processes, influenced by her own experience overcoming psychological warfare designed to break her spirit and force her surrender. Her innovative approaches to neural regeneration therapy incorporated insights about resilience and adaptation that emerged from personal understanding of how minds could heal from deliberate damage. The clinical trials conducted under Emma's supervision had attracted attention from medical institutions worldwide, with patient recovery rates that exceeded all previous benchmarks for treating traumatic brain injuries. The success stemmed partly from her recognition that healing required not only technical intervention, but also psychological support and environmental modifications that promoted recovery rather than perpetuating trauma. Emma's research team had expanded to include specialists in psychology, social work, and educational policy, reflecting her understanding that medical advancement required interdisciplinary collaboration and recognition of the social factors that influenced health outcomes. The holistic approach she advocated challenged traditional medical hierarchies while producing results that validated the importance of considering systemic issues alongside individual treatment protocols. The Global Medical Innovation Summit would provide Emma with an opportunity to present her research to an audience that included not only medical professionals, but also policymakers and funding organizations capable of implementing the systemic changes necessary to address healthcare disparities. Her presentation would advocate for research approaches that considered social justice implications alongside technical innovation, ensuring that medical advances benefited all populations, rather than only those with access to elite healthcare systems. The preparation for her keynote address required Emma to synthesize years of research data, with personal insights about overcoming systematic obstacles, creating a presentation that would inspire audience members while providing practical guidance for implementing similar approaches in their own professional contexts. The message would emphasize that breakthrough innovations often emerged from unexpected sources when institutional barriers were removed and merit-based evaluation systems were implemented. Emma's laboratory had become a model for collaborative research environments that prioritized intellectual excellence over traditional hierarchies, attracting visiting scholars and graduate students who sought training in both technical skills and the leadership principles necessary to create positive institutional change. The success of her approach was measured not only by research outcomes, but also by the career advancement of team members who applied similar strategies in their own professional development. The impact of Emma's work extended beyond medical. Research into educational policy discussions about preventing systematic harassment and creating supportive environments for students from diverse backgrounds. Her documented methods for overcoming institutional discrimination had influenced policy development at universities nationwide, providing frameworks for addressing privilege-based exclusion while promoting genuine academic excellence. The upcoming ceremony at Oakwood High School would mark Emma's return to the institution where her journey had begun, providing an opportunity to acknowledge the positive changes that had resulted from her refusal to accept injustice passively. The school's transformation from a bastion of privilege into a genuine meritocracy demonstrated that individual courage could indeed challenge and change institutional discrimination when combined with strategic thinking and persistent effort. Principal Davidson's invitation had included information about current students who were following pathways similar to Emma's own journey, demonstrating that the changes implemented after her confrontation with systematic harassment had created lasting opportunities for academic excellence, regardless of economic background. The ceremony would celebrate not only individual achievements, but also the institutional commitment to supporting all students in reaching their potential. Emma's acceptance speech would address the graduating class with messages about perseverance, strategic thinking, and the importance of using success to create opportunities for others facing similar challenges. Her presence would demonstrate that the quiet scholarship student who had once been targeted for elimination had not only survived, but thrived, becoming a leader whose work would benefit countless others for generations to come. The journey from victim to victor had required more than personal courage. It had demanded the development of strategic intelligence, moral clarity, and the recognition that individual battles against injustice served broader purposes beyond personal vindication. Emma's story continued to inspire those who faced their own confrontations with systematic discrimination, proving that preparation, persistence, and principled action could overcome even the most entrenched systems of privilege and prejudice. As Emma prepared for both the medical conference and the high school ceremony, she reflected on the responsibility that accompanied her platform and influence, understanding that her achievements created opportunities to advocate for systemic changes that would benefit future generations of students and researchers. The quiet girl, who had once hidden her capabilities to avoid attracting hostile attention, had become a voice for justice and merit-based evaluation in institutions worldwide. The transformation was complete, but the mission continued. Emma Thompson's legacy would be measured not only by her scientific contributions, but also by the positive changes she had inspired in educational and research environments, demonstrating that true strength emerges from the combination of individual excellence and commitment to collective advancement. Her story proved that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from transforming systems that create enemies, building bridges where barriers once stood, and ensuring that merit triumphs over privilege in the pursuit. of human knowledge and progress. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.